It was an ordinary Sunday when my granddaughter Holly slipped a note beneath the dining room table. My hands trembled as I unfolded it and read the words scrawled in her careful handwriting. "Grandma, call 911 now. Please don't let them know I told you." My heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. Across from me, Carter, my son, was pouring wine with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, raised her glass for a toast that sounded rehearsed, artificial. And I, Georgia Herrera, at 66 years old, had just received the most terrifying message of my life from an 8-year-old child. What in God's name was happening in my own home? It had all begun with an argument that shattered our family's foundation forever. Carter had arrived that afternoon with Vanessa, but without Holly. That detail alone had seemed strange to me. They always brought the girl on Sundays, but this time their expressions were grave, their postures rigid. Something was wrong. I knew at the moment they walked through my door. "Mom, we need to talk to you," Carter said, avoiding my gaze as he settled onto the sofa. Vanessa remained standing, positioned as though preparing for battle. "It's about the house, and about your future." George, my husband, had gone out to buy the newspaper. It was as if they calculated the perfect moment to catch me alone. I sat across from them, feeling the air in the living room grow thick and suffocating. "My future?" I asked, though something deep inside me already knew I wouldn't like what was coming. "Mom, you're 66 now," Carter began, finally meeting my eyes. "This house is too big for you and Dad. You can't maintain it the way you used to." It was a lie. George and I took impeccable care of our home. The garden was pristine, the walls freshly painted, every corner spotless. But I let him continue, waiting to hear where this was leading. "Vanessa and I have been thinking," he went on, taking his wife's hand. "It would be better if you transfer the house to us now, like an advance on the inheritance. That way, you could move somewhere smaller, more suitable for your age." The cynicism of his words struck me like a physical blow. George had worked at the factory for 40 years to pay for every single brick of this house. 40 years of me rising at 5 in the morning to pack his lunch, of saving every penny, of denying myself small luxuries so Carter could have an education, decent clothes, so he would never lack for anything. An advance on the inheritance. I repeated slowly, letting the words settle between us. "Carter, this house isn't just property. It's our home. It's where we raised your sister Claudia, where we celebrated your birthdays, where—" "Mom, don't be sentimental," Vanessa interrupted, her smile cold and calculated. "It's just a house. And frankly, you're both too old to maintain something this size. It would be more responsible of you to think about us, about Holly, about her future." There was the car they always played, my granddaughter. As if I didn't think about Holly every waking moment. As if I wasn't the one who bought her school supplies when they ran short on money, who sewed her costumes for school plays, who cared for her when she was sick and they had to work. "We have debts, Mom," Carter confessed, lowering his voice. "Significant debts. If we don't pay them soon, we're going to lose everything. And Holly. Holly doesn't deserve to go through that." My son wasn't asking for help. He was demanding that I surrender my house, my home, the place where I had built my entire life. And he was using my granddaughter as emotional blackmail. "What kind of debts?" I asked, though from the way Carter avoided my gaze, I already had a terrible suspicion. "That doesn't matter," Vanessa interjected quickly. "What matters is that we can resolve this if you help us, if you give us the house." "No," I said firmly. "This house is not for sale, and I certainly won't give it to you to pay off debts you don't even have the courage to tell me about." Vanessa's face transformed. The mask of kindness fell away like a torn garment, revealing something ugly beneath. "Georgia, I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation," she said, her voice hardening. "We're not asking. We're informing you of what's going to happen." "Excuse me." I stood up, feeling my blood begin to boil. "Look, old woman," Vanessa said, and that word dripped from her mouth like poison. "You're getting old. George is too. Any moment now, you're going to need specialized care. You'll become too senile to make your own decisions. Don't you think it's better to do this the easy way now? Carter said nothing. My own son remained silent while his wife threatened me in my own living room. In that moment, I understood that I had lost my son a long time ago. Vanessa had stolen him, transformed him into a stranger who looked at me as though I were merely an obstacle in his path. "Get out," I said in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. "Get out of my house. Now." "Mom," Carter started. "Out," I screamed, pointing toward the door. "And don't come back until you're ready to apologize and tell me the truth about those debts." They left, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled in their frames. George arrived 10 minutes later, to find me crying on the sofa, clutching my chest with a pain I couldn't identify. Was it anger or heartbreak? I told him everything. George remained silent for several long minutes, processing our son's betrayal. Finally, he took my hand and said, "Georgia, something tells me this isn't over." He was right, because 3 weeks later, Carter and Vanessa appeared at my door with Holly and false smiles plastered on their faces, acting as though nothing had happened, as if they hadn't threatened me, as if they hadn't tried to steal my house. And now, with that note trembling between my fingers, I understood that George had been absolutely right. This wasn't over. It had barely begun. "Is everything all right, Mom?" Carter asked from across the table, his voice unnaturally high-pitched. I quickly folded Holly's note and slipped it into the pocket of my green dress, fighting to keep my expression neutral. My granddaughter looked at me with those wide, frightened eyes, but when Carter turned toward her, Holly immediately dropped her gaze to her plate. "Of course, son," I replied, forcing a smile. "I was just thinking how delicious the food Vanessa prepared is." Vanessa smiled, but there was something calculated about it, something that made my skin crawl. "Thank you, Georgia. I wanted this lunch to be special, familiar, like old times." Old times? Did she mean before she threatened me in my own living room? Before she tried to steal my house? But I remained calm, schooling my features. Something was terribly wrong here, and Holly's note was a proof. George chewed his chicken slowly, oblivious of the tension crackling in the air. My husband had always been a calm, trusting man, perhaps too trusting. He didn't notice Carter's nervous glances, the way Vanessa controlled every movement at the table, or how Holly had barely touched her food. "Holly, sweetheart, aren't you hungry?" I asked, hope in my voice sounded natural. "Not really, Grandma," my granddaughter murmured without looking up. "She's fine," Vanessa intervened quickly. "Children just aren't hungry sometimes, right, Holly?" The girl nodded, but I saw her small hands trembling slightly. My heart began to race. What had they done to my granddaughter? What did she know that I didn't? For the next several minutes, I tried to act normal while observing every detail. Carter got up 3 times to go to the kitchen for unnecessary things. More water, napkins that were already on the table, salt that nobody had requested. Every time he returned, he exchanged a meaningful look with Vanessa. "You know what, Mom?" Carter said, settling back down after his 4th trip to the kitchen. "Vanessa and I have been thinking a lot about our last conversation." Here it came. Whatever they had planned was already in motion. "Oh, really?" I replied, taking a sip of water. The liquid had a strange taste, slightly bitter, but I thought perhaps it was just my nerves playing tricks on me. "Yes," Vanessa continued, taking Carter's hand on the table in what seemed like a rehearsed gesture. "We realized we might have been too direct, too harsh with you. We want to apologize." "Absolutely," Carter added, and for a fleeting moment, I almost believed his sincerity. "Almost. We understand this house means a great deal to you," Vanessa went on, "and we don't want to pressure you into making a hasty decision." Liar. Holly's note burned in my pocket like evidence of something horrible unfolding before my eyes, but I played along. "I appreciate you understanding that," I said carefully. "That's why," Carr continued, "we thought perhaps you could come have lunch with us more often. Spend more time together as a family." "Yes," Vanessa added with false enthusiasm. "We could do this every Sunday." "Holly would be thrilled, wouldn't you, sweetie?" Holly nodded weakly, but when her parents weren't looking, she shot me a desperate glance that broke my heart into pieces. I took another sip of water, and this time the bitter taste was unmistakable. Something was wrong with my drink. Very, very wrong. I set the glass down and pretended to keep eating, but my mind was racing at 100 miles per hour. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" Carter asked, and there was something in his tone that wasn't genuine concern. It was expectation, anticipation. A little tired, I admitted, and it wasn't a lie. I suddenly felt strangely heavy, as if my thoughts were moving through molasses. "Maybe you should lie down for a bit," Vanessa suggested immediately. "After lunch, of course." "Yes," Carter agreed. "You've been working so hard in the garden lately. Maybe it's too much for a woman my age?" I finished the sentence for him, and something in my tone put them both on alert. "I didn't mean that." Carter backtracked quickly, but I already understood. The bitter taste in the water, the insistence that I come for lunch, the nervous glances, Holly's desperate note. They were drugging me. In my own house, in front of George, in front of my granddaughter, they were slowly poisoning me. "Excuse me," I said, standing up carefully. "I need to use the bathroom." In the bathroom, I pulled out Holly's note and read it again. Call 911 now. But what would I tell them? That my son and daughter-in-law were drugging me? Did I have proof? Would anyone believe me? I looked in the mirror. My eyes looked strange, my pupils more dilated than normal. There was definitely something in that water. But I had to be smart. If I confronted them now without evidence, they would deny everything. And if they really were drugging me, what did they plan to do next? I returned to the table, trying to walk normally, though my legs felt like jelly. "Everything okay, Grandma?" Holly asked, and in her eyes I saw a fear that made me understand the gravity of the situation. "Perfectly fine, my love," I replied, giving her a discreet wink. I hoped she understood that I had received her message. George was still eating, completely oblivious. He was drinking from his own glass without any problems, which meant they were only poisoning mine. Carter and Vanessa exchanged another look when they thought I wasn't watching. "Mom," Carter said suddenly, "you've been forgetting things lately, haven't you?" The question hit me like a ton of bricks. "I'm sorry." "Well," Vanessa intervened smoothly. "The other day when we spoke on the phone, you seemed a little confused, like you didn't remember our previous conversation." A lie. I remembered every venomous word they had spoken. "And George told us that sometimes you get up at night and don't remember why," Carter added. Another lie. George had never said that because it had never happened. But my husband looked at them with confusion, clearly puzzled by these supposed conversations that had never occurred. "I don't remember saying that," George muttered. "Oh, but it's normal," Vanessa said quickly. "Sometimes older people don't notice these little changes themselves. It's gradual." They were building a narrative. They were painting me as a senile, forgetful woman who needed specialized care. And they had probably been planning this for weeks. "Maybe you should see a doctor," Carter suggested with false concern, "just to make sure everything is all right." "A geriatrician," Vanessa added. "We know a very good one. Very understanding about delicate situations. A doctor who was probably bought off, or at least willing to diagnose dementia based solely on their testimony." The plan was becoming clearer by the second. "Mom, are you listening to me?" Carter asked, and I realized I had been quiet for too long. "Yes, son," I replied, letting my voice sound slightly confused. "Sorry, I got distracted. What were you saying about a doctor?" Vanessa smiled triumphantly. Carter visibly relaxed. They thought their plan was working perfectly. But I understood everything now. They were drugging me to make me appear senile. They would document my confused behavior during these family lunches. They would gather witnesses to confirm my mental decline. And then, with the help of their bought-off geriatrician, they would have me declared incompetent to manage my own affairs. The house would be theirs, and I would end up in some nursing home, drugged and silenced, while they enjoyed the fruits of 40 years of hard work, mine and George's. But they had one problem. Holly, my brave granddaughter, had discovered their plan and risked everything to warn me. Now I had to be smarter than them. The rest of the lunch was an award-worthy performance on my part. I pretended to be increasingly confused, dropped my fork a couple times, asked the same question twice. Carter and Vanessa exchanged satisfied glances every time I seemed lost. George, my poor George, started to genuinely worry. "Georgia, are you sure you feel all right?" he asked, touching my forehead with his hand. "You're a little pale." "I'm fine, my love," I replied, but I let my voice tremble slightly. "Just a bit tired." "See, Dad," Carter said, using that condescending voice he had perfected in recent weeks. "This is why we're worried. Mom has been different." Vanessa nodded with a look of manufactured concern. "George, I've noticed it too. On our last few visits, Georgia seemed disoriented, as if she couldn't remember conversations we'd just had." My husband looked at me with eyes full of genuine love and concern. I hated lying to him, hated making him believe something was wrong with me, but I needed time to fully understand Carter and Vanessa's plan. "Maybe we should call Dr. Martinez," George suggested. "He's been our doctor for 20 years. No, Vanessa intervened quickly. "Dr. Martinez is too old for these specialized issues. You need someone more up-to-date, a specialist. We know Dr. Victor Mitchell," Carter added. "He's the best geriatrician in the city. Very understanding, very professional. Their bought-off geriatrician, the man who had probably agreed to diagnose dementia in exchange for money or favors. We could make an appointment for next week," Vanessa continued, "just for him to examine Georgia, so we can all have peace of mind." Holly had remained silent during this entire conversation, but I could feel her tension from across the table. When her parents were distracted talking to George about doctors and symptoms, my granddaughter looked at me directly and mouthed one word: "Careful." My heart swelled with both pride and fear. This brave 8-year-old girl was risking everything to protect me, and I had to live up to her courage. "I think that's a good idea," I finally said, surprising everyone. "If you all think I need to see a doctor, I trust your judgment." The triumphant smile that crossed Vanessa's face was chilling. Carter relaxed completely, clearly convinced their plan was working perfectly. "Perfect, Mom," Carter said, taking my hand with false tenderness that turned my stomach. "We'll make the appointment first thing tomorrow morning." After lunch, they insisted I rest while they cleared the table. George retreated to his study to read the newspaper, and I pretended to go to my room. Instead, I stood listening from the hallway, my ear pressed close to the wall. "Do you think she's buying it?" Vanessa whispered. "Completely," Carter answered in a low voice. "You saw how she was acting during lunch. Confused, lost. Perfect. And what about George?" "George is a minor problem. He's so in love with Mom. He'll do anything he thinks is best for her. Once Dr. Mitchell confirms the diagnosis, George will sign any paper we put in front of him." "Are you sure Mitchell will cooperate?" "For $50,000 and the promise of being our primary doctor when we control Mom's assets, Mitchell will sign whatever is necessary." My blood ran cold. They weren't just drugging and manipulating me. They had bribed a doctor to falsify a medical diagnosis. This was far more serious than I had imagined. "And Holly?" Vanessa asked. She was very quiet today. "She's a kid," Carter replied indifferently. "She doesn't understand what's happening. And even if she did, who's going to believe her?" I wanted to run out and scream at these monsters that my granddaughter understood perfectly what was happening, that she was smarter and braver than both of them combined. But I held myself back. I needed more information. "How long do you think it will take?" Vanessa asked. "A month, 2 at most. First, the diagnosis. Then an observation period where we document her decline. And finally, the declaration of mental incompetence. Once we have legal guardianship, we can sell the house and pay off the debts. And if George resists, George is old and tired. Once he's convinced Mom needs specialized care, it'll be easier to convince him that a nursing home is best for her, especially when the aggressive episodes start." "Aggressive episodes?" Vanessa's voice sounded curious. "A higher dose of the sedative will make her act erratically. Aggressive, dangerous to herself and others. George will get so scared he'll beg us to put her in a facility." I had to bite my lip to keep from screaming. They were planning to drug me until I was a shadow of myself. then use my altered behavior as an excuse to lock me away, all to get my house and pay off debts they had probably accumulated from gambling or foolish investments. It's a perfect plan, Vanessa murmured. And afterward, we'll have the house, we'll pay the debts, and we can start fresh. Holly will have a better life without having to depend on the whims of a senile old woman. A senile old woman. That's how they saw me. After everything I had sacrificed for Carter, after all the years I had worked to give him a good life, I was just a senile old woman standing in their way. I heard them move toward the living room, so I silently returned to my room. I sat on the bed, trembling, not from the drugs, but from rage and fear. I had to do something. But what? If I confronted them now, they would deny everything. If I called the police, what would I say? That my son was drugging me based on a bitter taste of my water, and a note from an 8-year-old? I needed proof. I needed solid, irrefutable evidence of what they were doing, and I needed to protect Holly, who had already risked too much to save me. I heard footsteps in the hall. Someone was approaching my room. I quickly lay down and closed my eyes, pretending to sleep. "She's asleep," Vanessa whispered. "Looks like it," Carter replied. "The sedative is working perfectly. In an hour, she won't remember half of what happened today. Did you bring the camera?" My heart stopped. "Camera?" "Right here," Carter whispered. "Record while I ask the questions. We need to document her confusion to show Dr. Mitchell." I cracked one eye open just enough to see. Carter had his phone in his hand, clearly recording. Vanessa stood next to him, watching. "Mom," Carter said loudly, feigning surprise. "You're awake." I opened my eyes slowly, as if coming out of a deep sleep. "Carter, what time is it?" "It's 4 in the afternoon, Mom. We just had lunch. You don't remember?" I feigned confusion, squinting as if trying to recall. "We had lunch? When?" Carter exchanged a satisfied look with Vanessa. The camera was still recording. "An hour ago, Mom. Vanessa cooked chicken. Holly was here. You don't remember any of that?" "Holly," I repeated slowly. "My granddaughter was here?" "Yes, Mom. She ate with us. We talked about taking you to the doctor. Do you remember that conversation?" I shook my head, pretending to be completely lost. "No, I don't remember. Why do I need to see a doctor?" "Because you've been forgetting things, Mom. Like right now. You've been very confused lately." I let my eyes fill with real tears, because even though I was acting, the betrayal was real. The pain was real. "I don't understand," I whispered. "What's happening to me?" "Don't worry, Mom," Carter said, his voice so tender that for a moment I almost forgot it was all a cruel act. "We're going to take care of you. The doctor will help us understand what's going on." Vanessa nodded solemnly from behind the camera. They were creating the perfect evidence of my supposed mental decline. "Get some more rest," Carter suggested. "When you wake up, maybe you'll feel better." They left the room, closing the door softly. I heard them whispering in the hall about how well the recording had turned out, about how Dr. Mitchell would be impressed with the evidence. I lay there, my heart pounding so violently I was certain it could be heard throughout the entire house. I had witnessed their deception firsthand, but now I had to be smarter than ever, because I knew if I made one mistake, I would end up exactly where they wanted me, drugged, silenced, and locked away while they enjoyed everything George and I had worked for our entire lives. That night, after Carter and Vanessa left with Holly, I waited until George was asleep to execute my plan. My husband snored softly beside me, completely unaware of the danger hanging over us. I slipped out of bed carefully, moving like a shadow through our home. The first thing I did was retrieve the glass I had been drinking from during lunch. I had discreetly hidden it in the kitchen cabinet while pretending to help clean up. Under the moonlight streaming through the window, I examined the bottom of the glass. There was an almost imperceptible white residue, like fine powder that hadn't fully dissolved. I took a small plastic bag and carefully scraped that residue into it. It wasn't much, but perhaps it would be enough for a laboratory to identify what they had given me. I hid the bag in the back of my jewelry box, behind the pearls my mother had left me. Then I went in my study and retrieved my old cell phone, the one George always told me I should replace. I never thought I'd be grateful for keeping something so simple and outdated. I searched online for information about Dr. Victor Mitchell. What I found chilled my blood. Dr. Mitchell had been sanctioned 3 times by the medical board in the last 5 years. Once for billing for services not rendered, another for diagnosing non-existent conditions, and a third for prescribing medication without medical justification. He was exactly the kind of corrupt Dr. Carter and Vanessa needed for their plan. But I also found something more interesting. A 2-year-old news story about a lawsuit where Mitchell had been sued by a family claiming he falsely diagnosed their father with dementia to favor a son who wanted the inheritance. The case had been dismissed for lack of evidence, but the details were eerily familiar. It was exactly what they were planning to do to me. I took screenshots of everything and saved them in a new folder on my phone. Then I researched secret recordings and legal evidence. I discovered that in our state, a person could record conversations they were part of without the other party's consent. That meant if I could record Carter and Vanessa admitting their plan, it would be valid evidence in court. I also searched for laboratories that would analyze substances without a doctor's order. I found 2 in the city that offered private toxicology analysis. One of them, the Independent Forensic Laboratory, promised results in 48 hours and absolute discretion. My next step was riskier. I needed access to Carter's phone to obtain the recording they had made of me that afternoon. I remembered he always left his phone charging in the kitchen when he visited, plugged into the charger we had bought especially for him. But that would have to wait until the next visit. For now, I had to focus on documenting everything. I wrote a detailed letter explaining the entire situation. The first argument about the house, the veiled threats, today's lunch, the drugs in my water, the conversation I had overheard, and the recording they made while I pretended to be confused. I dated the letter, signed it, and placed it in the safe with our important documents. I also wrote a second letter addressed to my lawyer, Charles Miller, explaining everything and asking him to review my will and power of attorney. If something happened to me, I wanted to ensure George was protected and that Carter couldn't manipulate him. As I wrote, my mind worked furiously, planning the next steps. I needed to be extremely careful. If Carter and Vanessa suspected I was onto them, they might accelerate their plans or even become violent. Holly had already taken enough of a risk by warning me. I couldn't expose her any further. At 3 a.m, I finally returned to bed. George shifted slightly when I lay down, but he didn't wake. I watched him sleep and felt a mixture of love and guilt. My poor husband had no idea our son had decided to betray us in the cruelest way possible. On Monday morning, Carter called early, just as he had promised. "Mom, I got the appointment with Dr. Mitchell for Wednesday at 2 p.m. Does that work for you?" "Of course, son," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "If you think it's necessary." "It's necessary, Mom. After what happened yesterday, George and I are very worried about you." Liar. George was worried. Carter was calculating how much money he could extract from my house. "Is George coming with me?" I asked. "Of course, Mom. We want him to feel comfortable with the doctor, too. After all, if you need special care, George will be involved in the decisions." Special care. What an elegant euphemism for nursing home. "I understand, son. I'll see you on Wednesday, then." "Mom, are you feeling okay today?" No more episodes of confusion. Episodes of confusion. They already had the medical vocabulary prepared. "I feel fine, Carter. A little tired, but fine." "Perfect. Get lots of rest." "And Mom, don't go out alone, okay? Just in case." "Just in case of what?" "Just in case you get confused or lost. It's just a precaution." He was isolating me, limiting my movements, creating the narrative of a woman who could no longer care for herself. After hanging up, I told George the first had some errands to run downtown. My husband, worried by the previous day's conversation, insisted on accompanying me. "George, honey, I need to go alone. It's women's business." "What kind of women's business?" "The gynecologist." I lied without blinking. "Just a routine checkup." George blushed slightly and nodded. 45 years of marriage, and he still got nervous about female medical issues. My first stop was the independent forensic laboratory. The receptionist, a young woman with red glasses, greeted me professionally. "Good morning, ma'am. How can we help you?" I took out the small bag with the residue from the glass. "I need you to analyze this. I think someone put something in my drink." The receptionist didn't seem surprised. She had probably seen similar cases before. "Do you have any idea what kind of substance it might be?" "Something that causes confusion, drowsiness, memory loss. A sedative, maybe?" "Understood. The full analysis costs $200 and will have results in 48 hours. Will you need an official report for legal purposes?" "Yes, please." I filled out the forms using my full name, paid in cash, and kept the receipt carefully. In 48 hours, I would have scientific proof they were drugging me. My second stop was Charles Miller's law office. My lawyer had known me for 20 years. He had handled the purchase of our house, our wills, and a few minor issues over the years. "Georgia, what a surprise. How are you and George?" "Charles, I need your help with something very serious." I told him the whole story, from beginning to end. Charles listened without interrupting, but I saw his expression harden with every detail I revealed. "Georgia, this is extremely serious. What you're describing constitutes several crimes: attempted fraud, administering a substance without consent, conspiracy to commit fraud. What can I do to protect myself? First, we're going to review your will and your power of attorney. We'll make sure only George can make medical decisions for you, and only in the event of actual documented incapacity by independent physicians. And if they try to have me declared incompetent, with the evidence you're gathering, it will be impossible. But we need more evidence. Do you have a way to record their confessions?" "I'm working on that." Charles gave me a small digital recorder the size of a lipstick. This records for up to 8 hours. The quality is excellent, and it's completely legal to use in conversations you are part of. He also gave me a card with the number of a private investigator. If you need additional help gathering evidence, Naomi Garcia is the best. Very discreet, very professional. I left the office feeling more prepared, but also more nervous. Wednesday was the appointment with Dr. Mitchell, and I knew it would be the most dangerous moment. I had to act confused enough that they wouldn't suspect me, but not so much that the false diagnosis seemed credible. That night, George and I ate dinner in silence. My husband watched me with concern, clearly disturbed by Carter's comments about my confusion. "Georgia," he finally said, "did you really not remember lunch on Sunday?" My heart broke. George was beginning to doubt my sanity based on our son's lies. "George, honey," I said, taking his hand, "have I ever lied to you in 45 years of marriage?" "Never." "Then trust me when I tell you that something is very wrong here. Something Carter and Vanessa aren't telling us." George looked into my eyes for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "I trust you, Georgia. I've always trusted you." It was all I needed to hear. Whatever happened on Wednesday, George would be on my side. Wednesday arrived like an expected storm. Carter and Vanessa showed up at my door at 1:30 with false smiles and formal clothes that looked chosen to make a respectable impression on the corrupt doctor. "Ready, Mom?" Carter asked, offering me his arm as if I were a frail old woman who needed help walking. "Ready," I replied, making sure the recorder Charles had given me was hidden in the inner pocket of my purse. George accompanied us in silence, but I could feel his tension. My husband was an intuitive man. Something told him this appointment wasn't what it seemed. Dr. Mitchell's office was in a downtown medical tower on the 14th floor. The waiting room was luxurious, with cream-colored leather chairs and fashion magazines, all designed to give an impression of success and reliability. Mrs. Georgia Herrera, Carter announced to the receptionist, an older woman with perfectly styled hair and professional smile. "Of course, Dr. Mitchell is expecting you." We were shown into a spacious office with framed diplomas covering one wall. Dr. Mitchell was a man in his 50s with perfectly coiffed gray hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Exactly what I expected from a doctor willing to falsify diagnoses for money. "Mrs. Herrera, a pleasure to meet you," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that lasted uncomfortably long. "Your son has told me about his concerns." "Doctor, Carter intervened immediately. As I explained on the phone, Mom has been having episodes of confusion, memory loss, temporal disorientation. I understand, Mitchell nodded, taking notes in a ledger. How often do these episodes occur? More and more frequently. Vanessa lied smoothly. Last Sunday, she didn't remember having lunch with us just an hour later. George shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Doctor, I live with Georgia every day and I haven't noticed. That's normal, Mitchell interrupted quickly. Family members who live with the patient daily often don't notice the gradual changes. It's the relatives who visit occasionally who detect the decline. How convenient. A perfect explanation to dismiss George's testimony. Do you have any recordings of these episodes? Mitchell asked, turning to Carter. As a matter of fact, I do, Carter replied, taking out his phone. My heart began to race. This was the moment I had been waiting for.